One highly anticipated game this year, largely through its association with the PS5's initial announcement, was an indie action-adventure made by a studio who'd never made a game before. Which is surprising because that's not normally the kind of game that catches that much attention. Kena, Bridge of Spirits is a game about the titular spirit guide heading out to find a shrine in the mountains of a cursed village. Along the way, she encounters spirits in need of help moving on, bringing them peace with their unfinished business. She's aided in this task by adorable little forest creatures known as the Rot, born out of the corruption and turned into the antithesis of it in the process. And it is charming as hell. I've played this on and off since release and found a lot of enjoyment in it, as one of the best games I've played from this year. And so today I'm going to examine 6 reasons why I found it so lovable. Spoiler free if you're concerned about that.
I sense suffering here, Spirit.
At the start I mentioned that this was developer Ember Lab's first game, which might raise questions about why it got so much attention, but this is not actually their first project as a studio overall. Prior to Kena, they were an animation studio formed in 2009, and up until this point they mostly produced character work for commercial clients. Oh, and a Majora's Mask fan film a few years back that went viral for just how stunning it looked. And if you think, man, that level of attention in a game would look amazing, then you would be correct, because here's Kena, Bridge of Spirits. I am a sucker for really good, expressive, cartoony animation. I've talked about this on the channel before, when I heaped praise on Crash Bandicoot 4 for its animation style, so naturally Kena won me over with its first trailer because, well, just look at it. It's an interactive Pixar movie. The game consistently wows me with its visuals, the expressive facial animation, the fluid movement, the way everything just feels so alive. In an industry so focused on stodgy hyper-realism, seeing a game so unafraid to embrace traditional animation techniques and focus on expression first is a joy to behold. Kena herself is the perfect illustration of all of this. Her gentle expressions do most of the work in figuring out what kind of person she is. Her movements throughout the game always feel like they have weight and resistance in all the right ways, and so much of her appearance has been designed specifically to contain movement at all times, from her hair to her bag to her shoulder shawl, which adds a lot to making her feel alive. The team's animation expertise is constantly on display, and for this, it is always a joy.
I sense suffering here, Spirit.
As is probably clear from the team's decision to make a Zelda fan film for the internet prior to the game's release, Kena rips a lot from Nintendo's series for its own mechanics. There's even a mask mechanic, although it's only used for tracking rather than anything more significant. It being a Zelda-like isn't particularly noteworthy or charming, but where it works well is in providing a lot of semi-open environments with a lot to discover. The way the environments are built actively encourages exploration, with little hints to secrets poking their way through your periphery vision to lead you to wonder exactly how you can get to that chest or up to that tree. I tend to get bored very quickly with a lot of modern open world games. Massive maps full of markers to tick off has led me to mostly skip past all this in these games and just follow the story. Or just stop if that part of the game isn't great either. But in Kena, I actively explore, and that's because the environment is a bunch of small maps grouped together, and the paths to secrets are usually their own little puzzle or quest. While the rewards are often samey, whether it's a new little buddy, a meditation spot to increase your health, or a chest full of currency, the journey to get there becomes its own reward. As I've played through Kena, I care less about ticking off all the boxes, and more about finding joy in exploration. Games have gotten bad at this in many areas, and to see a game designed by first-timers nail it so perfectly out the gate is commendable. Plus, if you do discover a new buddy in your exploration, it's always wonderful to see where they're hiding because, well,
I sense suffering here, Spirit.
These are the Rot, and they aid Kena in her mission. They help purify the land, can be chucked at enemies as a distraction, and can strengthen Kena's attacks for massive special moves. They can also be used to move objects around in the world. They are basically what would happen if Nintendo decided to add Pikmin to a Zelda game. And would you look at these little guys? They are adorable in every possible way. They've got massive eyes, squishy little bodies, and are almost always just happy to be here. And in general gameplay, they warp around, chilling out on bits of scenery, just having a great time. They also hover around Kena constantly and stare up at her lovingly. The game revolves so heavily around these aggressively adorable mascot characters, and fine, I've been suckered in by them. They are offensively cute, and how dare you do this?
I sense suffering here, Spirit.
Oh, but that's not all. Not content with making these plushies and waiting, Ember Lab decided to take it one step further. Throughout Kena, your exploration isn't always rewarded with currency or more friends, sometimes it's rewarded with custom hat options. And I don't mean for Kena herself, as she largely just stays in her one outfit for the whole game. I mean the Rot get hats, and you can customize which of your squad members gets which hat. And of course these hats are tailor-made to be aggressively adorable, wearing a bowl on their head, cat and dog ears, a simple frog on the head, a big old mushroom cap, the slightly less adorable fungal growths. The point is, the Rot have custom hats, and once again I'm offended by this level of cute.
I sense suffering here, Spirit.
While all this visual splendor makes the game charming enough on its own, it's all brought together by the soundtrack. With so much of the world inspired by Southeast Asia, particularly cultures around Indonesia, it makes sense that the soundtrack incorporates a lot of that culture too. Behind the scenes they worked with a Balinese musical group who was happy to have their culture represented since they resonated with the central themes of the game, and so a ton of traditional Asian instruments blend through the game's soundscape and helps ground the setting culturally. But here's the thing. The developers were also inspired by Disney movies and The Legend of Zelda, and both influences show up in the music too. This creates gorgeously evocative pieces that constantly play throughout the game with soft melodies and a distinct Asian vibe. And it's all wonderful. While the soundtrack isn't always obvious to the player, it's woven into the experience meticulously. Quite often I found myself caught on a soft flute playing in the background or some chimes filtering through, and I just stopped to appreciate what I was hearing. It made for a relaxing experience as I wandered the world. This blending of influences, a focus on melody, and a general chill vibe made for one of the more interesting game soundtracks of the year for me.
I sense suffering here, Spirit.
When people accuse games of being like they're on the PS2, they're usually being insulting. It's a derogatory statement designed to say that a game looks low budget, while simultaneously admitting that the person saying this has never actually seen a PS2 game before. What we forget, however, is that the PS2 era was the moment right when the bad old days of figuring out 3D were over, and right before AAA games started falling into typical molds and losing a lot of their creative spark. Kena does feel like a PS2 game, from a design perspective. It's not a vast, expansive open world game, although there is a world to explore. It's not about finding a million feathers somewhere on the map so you can earn armor you'll use for about 2 seconds before putting the game down forever. It's not laden with microtransactions, there's no tedious crafting system requiring you to rub on a bunch of trees before you're allowed to progress anywhere meaningful. And there certainly aren't any pointless blockchain mechanics, which is the latest terrible fad the big publishers are going for. Kena feels like a throwback to a time before these things began to take over. It is a simple game with a simple story and a simple world, and combat isn't super complex either. Instead, it sticks to specific elements it requires to provide the experience it wants to, and refines and polishes every aspect as much as possible. Is it perfect? Not at all. Combat can sometimes feel excessively tough, and the difference between easy and normal difficulties is far too vast in my opinion. The game structure leans too close to repetition at times, as each act of the game requires gathering 3 items and bringing them to one place to fight a boss, and sometimes the story can feel a little flat. But even with these flaws, there is a passion to all of this. With the gorgeous animation and attention to detail on basically everything in the world, this is a handcrafted experience from a team with a desire to bring back exploratory Zelda-style games on things that aren't Nintendo consoles. And aside from some of the trickier boss fights, Kena made me smile the entire time I was playing it. It felt like a living Pixar movie that I could run around in. It was full of charm and joy and heart, all with a higher budget feeling in its visuals. Kena Bridge of Spirits is one of the most charming games of the year so far. More of this, please. Thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed me celebrating Kena Bridge of Spirits. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to like and subscribe, and let me know your thoughts down in the comments. It all feeds the mighty algorithm and helps the channel grow. And share the video around if you can too, it all helps. I'd also like to say a big thank you to my patrons here, and if you would also like to support the channel, there is a link to my Patreon in the description. That's all for now though, I will see you again soon.